was stunned when a stranger came to our house and asked me where his wife was. Here's what I did. I never knew I was a CO husband to my wife until another man showed up at my doorstep and asked to see his wife. My name is Jeremy, and I'm a 38-year-old lab technician. I have been married to Dora, my supposed wife, for the past 5 years. Yes, I've been an absolute fool for over 5 years now. I met her 9 years ago, we started dating 2 years later, then got married within 2 years. I thought I was married to a loyal woman for 5 freaking years, only to get the shock of my life now. We have had the hardest freaking marriage, but I never imagined that infidelity was a part of it. It's completely nerve-wracking and foolish, and just thinking about it gives me absolute goosebumps. I was a CO husband for 5 years. I just can't stress the severity of the situation enough, but there's no other way to do this. I'm a hardworking man, and I will say this with my head up high. If I don't give myself flowers after being cheated on despite my loyalty, who will? I'm so over the asterisk T of being a gentleman when all it gave me was betrayal. I tried being a gentleman and working hard to provide for the woman I called my wife, but she was sleeping around under my nose and planning a family elsewhere. This whole episode of my life has different sensitive topics lined around it, but I will not withhold any information now. My anger surpasses any compassion I have for Dora and her stupid second husband. If you noticed earlier while I was introducing myself and my wife, I didn't include children. That's because we do not have any children together. In the past, the thought of this usually made me extremely sad, but now I can't help but thank my stars that I do not have any children with that witch. Yes, she's an absolute witch with zero compassion or common sense. She manipulated me, emotionally blackmailed me, and made me believe she was going through hell while not being able to hear children. Unknown to me that she had a child with another man. Even though this whole situation just vexes me, I am happy that I gave her a taste of her own medicine and didn't just let her go scot-free. My marriage with Dora has not been easy at all, and we have been through a lot together. I just had no idea that she had things elsewhere, and she was busy lying to me. The main problem in our marriage has been trying to give birth to children. She has had problems birthing children for the longest time. Even before we got married, she told me she had the fear of not being able to conceive. Of course, I didn't just ditch her after she told me that 24 hours before our wedding. She was crying, emotional, and mentally down. I was her fiancé, the man she was supposed to marry. There was no way I was going to turn my back on her and pretend like I didn't hear her tell me something so heartbreaking. I stood by her and refused to end the marriage, even though it seemed like she gaslighted me. Yes, that's exactly what it seemed like. She didn't have to wait so long to tell me the truth. We dated for nearly 2 years, and she didn't tell me any of that. She waited till 24 hours before we tried not to give such a news to me. I believe that was emotional blackmail, but because of the kind man I was brought up to be, I couldn't turn my back on that relationship. It was 100% real on my own end, and I never doubted that. So, we did in fact end up getting married, and that's when all hell started to break loose. Before I go on, I just want to make something clear. Even though we had deep problems in our marriage, cheating was never one of them. At least that's what I thought. Infidelity, adultery, or even polygamy never sprung up anywhere. So, that's why I am completely surprised right now. But that's just besides the fact. Let me get back into what I've been saying. The first phase of our problem started with her insecurities. Yes, she was very insecure at the beginning of our marriage. She would tell me how she hated how she looked and believed that she was not worth my attention or love. I never said a word of this to anyone because I genuinely believed that it was no one's business. But it did bother me very much. I mean, who wouldn't be bothered that their wife was talking down on herself just 2 months after marriage? We were barely out of the honeymoon phase, and I had to assure her every single day that there was nothing wrong with her. It was draining for me because I also had to work hard and provide for the house. But I was ready to be present to my spouse who was having self-confidence issues. I never complained, even though I could see that the whole thing was ruining our marriage. I had to come home to a nagging wife every day, and that just gets me angry now that I think about it. She was a manipulative witch who just wanted to make me believe she was a helpless woman with insecurities, while she went behind my back to her other man and made him believe the same thing. That just makes me angry, but I'll carry on. So while I was busy trying my best to make her happy, she was busy timing me and doing the worst things possible. A lot happened before her AP came to my doorstep asking to see his wife, but a lot has also happened after. So let me tell you everything that went down. After the phase of Dora being extremely insecure and unnecessarily doubtful, she made the point of starting drama about her job. I've been on Reddit not quite long, but I'm definitely conversant with the number of women that come on here talking about how being a housewife is a lot to take in, and that housewives also deserve vacations and leaves. I never imagined when Dora was asking for the sake thing, all she actually wanted was a chance to keep on cheating on me. It sounds crazy, but that's the reality of our relationship. After almost 2 years of marriage and conquering her constant tantrums and insecurities, she started another phase of telling me she needed to travel regularly and have time to herself. That's when I actually started calling her out on her asterisk T, because it makes zero sense that a woman that doesn't work at all and doesn't do any house chores is complaining about being tired and wants a vacation. I can end up being called misogynistic because of this, but I'm a working man and I work about 12 hours a day. I never complained about needing time away or wanting to take a break. So how does a woman with zero responsibilities want a break? I mean, we didn't even have children, so what exactly is her point? It made no sense, and I told her that. I'm glad I never just gave in to her demands, because if I'd done that, I would have regretted it. I understood at that point in our marriage that Dora had issues. I just knew that she was extremely selfish and loved to manipulate. I already spent 3 years married to her at that point, so I knew how to make sure she didn't manipulate me. I stopped pampering her like I usually did, and made sure she understood the fact that I wasn't going to be trampled on just because I fell in love with her and married her. I also noticed that when Dora saw those changes, she stopped throwing tantrums and started acting normal. She stopped her unnecessary rants and started behaving like she did before we got married. At first, I still had my guard up because after 3 years, I was just too used to her tantrums. But after some time, I realized that she actually wanted to turn a new leaf and put in effort, so I decided to let my guard down and enjoy my marriage. I mean, that's the only reasonable thought I had at that point. I couldn't give up on my marriage. I couldn't give up on her. So, I decided to forgive all the things she had done before. While all this was going on, I had absolutely no idea that she was cheating on me. If I had known, then there would have been no way on earth that I would have forgiven her. I have zero tolerance for cheating, and I just can't forgive it no matter what. It all makes sense now that anytime she cheats or goes off to see her side piece, she has to come back K to me and blame me for things I have no fault in just to stop her guilt from increasing. She basically used me as someone that would pet her no matter what. When she noticed that I stopped being that person, she decided to act like her supposed normal self in order not to raise any more suspicion. I know some of you might be tempted to ask certain questions, so I'm open to answering as many as I can. The first question I believe you all would want to ask is if we went to see doctors over her supposed inability to give birth to children. Well, at first it was never a problem. Aside from the fact that I didn't want to hurt her feelings at first, I was also never really ready for children because I wanted to work and be a stable provider. But just last year, which is literally our 4th year as a married couple, I decided to bring up the topic of having children. Before we got married, and even after marriage, Dora always used birth control. At some point, I asked her why she used birth control if she was aware she couldn't bear children. Her simple reply was that it made her feel less bad. Listen, most men would have questions like, what caused your inability to conceive and stuff like that. But for me, I was just not ready to have kids yet, so I saw no reason to dive into things like that. And the fact that she had insecurities at the beginning made it even more difficult to bring up topics like that. That's why I never bothered. But after 4 years, I felt like I had given her enough time, and it was time for us to actually start trying to have children and plan a real family. I didn't ask for much or ask for a doctor's appointment. I just asked her to stay off the birth control so we could see what the problem actually was. But when I suggested that, all hell literally broke loose. Dora just wasn't having it, and her anger was insane. At first, it all felt like a movie, a very stupid one to be sincere. Because it made no sense that the same person that was emotional over not being able to birth children would get angry at me just because I suggested she stop giving birth control. It was at that point that I realized how cunning she actually was, and I started to get very alert around her. I made it clear to her that I wasn't ready to stay in a marriage that seemed so disorganized and selfish. Whenever it was time to make serious decisions, she would whine and cry and talk about her insecurities. I had dealt with her juvenile attitude for 4 years. I eventually got tired and told her I do not give a F***CK. Why would a married woman cry when her husband tells her she needed to stop birth control? What's so hard to do there? All that was extremely suspicious to me, and that just made me realize that I had to keep an eye on her. I stopped trying to appease her when she started throwing her tantrums because it all began to click. I mean, I am not some sort of comforter to get. I am her husband, and I shouldn't live my life trying to make her happy while she had zero consideration for me. I stopped babysitting her and started being more firm with her. I also made it clear to her that it was necessary to either stop using birth control or go to the hospital to get the both of us checked. Dora almost exploded when I told her all those things. I could tell that she hated the idea of having kids, and all that expression just contradicted all the emotional blackmail she tried to play before. Everything just made me remember how she tried to emotionally blackmail 24 hours before we got married. Everything started to make sense, so I called her one day and decided to confront her. I was done with the unnecessary gaslighting and back and forth. At some point, I believed that she was maybe gay. Yes, that's what I thought, because I couldn't understand why she made a fuss about everything, but when it came to spending my money, she seemed to be rational. I told myself that I had been patient enough and that I was done with everything. Of course, when I confronted her, she came up with her usual gaslighting excuses and claimed that I wasn't being supportive of her during the hardest time of her life. I had to ask her if the hardest time was in the room with us, because what does that mean? I'm the one who had to put up with her while still having a full-time job, providing for the house, and catering to her needs. I'm also the one who wanted a baby, but instead got accused of being misogynistic and not supportive. If anyone was having it tough or going through the hardest time of their life, it had to be me, and I was done with that she*T. I realized that she had used me as her doormat and I was being made into a simp. Just because I cared about her didn't mean that I would tolerate her dirty attitude forever. I'm not just saying all these things here. I literally told her everything without holding back. I made her understand that if we were at two different places in life and wanted two different things, then there was no reason for us to stay married. For me, it wasn't a threat, because at that point I was actually ready to freaking walk out of that marriage. It had taken more than it gave, so I didn't want to stay married to her if she was not ready to put in effort. I don't know how she did it, but it seemed like she could tell that I was getting tired of our relationship, so she decided to apologize for everything and promise he would stop taking birth control. Of course, I'm a man that thought my wife changed her ways. I took her word for it, and never snooped around after sex to see if she was going to take the pills or not. Well, she never took them in front of me like she did before, so I took her word for it, and decided not to be creepy and monitor her. But can you guys believe that none of this goodwill paid off? Absolutely none of it worked, and it actually ended up backfiring. She was still taking the pills, and I didn't get to know until just recently. I found out after her supposed second husband came up to me. I had to do the findings, and that's how the truth got revealed. So, let me just continue from where I stopped. When I discovered that she had changed her ways and stopped being baggy and bratty, I believed our marriage was back to normal. Anyone viewing everything from the outside could see that I was fed up with a lot of things she did, but I had to forgive her just that last time. I mean, at that point in time, no knowledge of infidelity was brought to light, so I didn't end the narrative. I just believed that the issues we passed through were going to toast for a period of time, and then we'll be back to being a normal couple. Because even though I hate to admit it, there were actually good times in our marriage. It was not always bad or disgusting. There were actually times when the both of us were at a good place, and we had the time of our lives. It was moments like that that made me not give up on the marriage and stay resilient. Well, now coming from someone that did all that, I want to tell you guys never to be so dedicated to a marriage unless you're absolutely sure your partner is worth it. The desire to have a successful marriage, be the man of the house, able to shoulder a lot of things and bounce back, got me so obsessed with perfection that I refused to see the cracks and imperfections in my marriage. To be honest, I regret all that with every fiber in me, but it's too late for all that. What's not too late is the revenge I had coming up for them. So after the birth control saga, which was about a year ago, I told her we would start going for doctor's appointments 1 year after trying and not noticing results. So everything seemed normal until 2 weeks ago. I was in the living room watching TV when I got a knock on the door. Dora was upstairs sleeping, so I actually started wondering who was at the door. Our relatives never visit often, and my friends always call before coming. Sig things with Dora's friends. But notwithstanding, I went to open the door to see who it was. I was surprised to see an angry-looking man at the door. I could tell that he had to be at least 40 years old. I didn't like his attitude at all, and I made that clear by asking him why he was at my doorstep. Of course, I would have never imagined that the angry-looking stranger would ask me, "Where is Dora?" "Well, excuse you?" That was the reply I had to give. How dare you show up in front of my house, call my wife by her name so blatantly, and then give me a brooding look? I questioned him about all that, and all he replied was, "I do not have time for all this trash. Where is my wife?" Do you know that feeling of an ice bucket of water being thrown on you? That was how I felt. You know, in normal circumstances. And by normal circumstances, I mean a happy marriage with no doubt or outstanding drama. If that's what I shared with Dora, the first thing I would have done would be to punch that man in the face, kick him, and then make him take back his words. But for a relationship that was already shaking, I didn't know how to react immediately. First of all, I told him to shut up and get out of my face, but he refused, asked me to get Dora, and told me to stay away from his wife. Now, that second statement got me riled up, and I made the point of grabbing him by the collar and telling him never to test my patience. He told me he didn't want trouble and only wanted to get his wife. Before he could finish his sentence, I told him to wait outside. Then I went to wake Dora from her nap. I didn't want to gaslight myself by sending the man away when I knew fully well that Dora had given me reasons to doubt her. I felt like I owed it to myself to discover the truth and not get blinded by trust. Well, at that point, I had not that much trust in her anyway. After taking her to the door with me and introducing her to the man that claimed was her husband, I got all the answers I needed. And Dora looked so spooked that she nearly fainted on the spot. I could tell that she was scared of the truth getting out. The man grabbed her hand, pulled her to his side, and said, "Why did you ghost me for so long? Our daughter has been crying nonstop." Yes, you read that right. I felt like I needed to punch myself at that point because I just couldn't believe it. First of all, another husband? And a child? The fact that we had gone through hell, or rather I had gone through hell looking for a way we could have a child, and all the while she had a child with someone else, was just crazy to me. I couldn't believe that she would be so cruel and crazy, but it was true. Oh, if not for my morals and the love for my home training, I would have lost control. She didn't say anything to the man or try to deny it, so I got my answer. I just closed the door and left them outside. 2 days after all these, I discovered that she had been with that man even before me and had a child with him. She visited him from my house all the time after our marriage and even had a 10-year-old child with him. They weren't legally married but called each other husband and wife. It still doesn't make sense to me that after having a family elsewhere, she wanted to come into my life and ruin me. That's why she didn't want children. Dias came to the house several times to get it, but I never let her in. I have sent her divorce papers, but before then, I sold all the expensive bags, shoes, and clothes I got her on Amazon and got my money back. I also changed her name from my next of kin back to my elder brother's own. She thought she could eat me dry, but I'm smarter. I'll finish this in the next update. Update. Sorry for the long wait, everyone. I had to get busy in real life. Appreciate all the comments, though. So I am now divorced, and I have never been happier. I didn't just sob at home and whine like a little kid. I made moves that could get me most of what I had lost back. I sold most of her stuff because honestly, I got her most of everything she owned. Thank God for Amazon at this point because I made my money back in that regard. The divorce prices were messy, but my lawyer was messier. I divorced her without giving her a single penny. I was also able to prove in court that she was destructive to my life, and I had evidence, pictures, and the fake medical report she showed me 24 hours to our wedding as proof. I walked out of that marriage without giving that witch anything. She got the shock of her life when she realized I sold her stuff and removed her as my next of kin. She begged and tried to trick me once again, but I refused to listen. Her little plaything is also hurt. Seems like they both planned to mess with me and eat my money, but it backfired. He couldn't take seeing her with me anymore and bursted their cover. She had been saving all the things I got her as investment, but by selling them, she was left with nothing, and that's all I ever wanted.